Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of PoCommunity. On today's edition, we have Mark George from Keller Williams. How's it going today?
Pretty fantastic. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for coming on today. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
Well, as you said, my name is Mark George. Keller Williams is a real estate company, so I'm a real estate agent here in the Lower Mainland. Been doing this for about 11 years now. And kind of got started in the real estate world. I was a sales guy for Lay's potato chips once upon a time. Everybody's best friend at barbecue season. It was fantastic. Everybody loved me. And there came a point in my life when I had kids that I figured I had to do something for the future, something long-term, something to make sure that they're taken care of going forward. And looked at the usual stuff, RSPs and mutual funds and stock market and all that. But eventually I settled on real estate. And I went and took some classes and I read some books and all these other things. And I found out very quickly that, yes, real estate can be a very good thing for building that wealth. A significant number of the world's wealthy got there by real estate. The thing I found out was that there wasn't very many real estate agents out there that were able to help me with what I was doing. Every real estate agent's like, yes, you can buy this now and probably sell it for more money later, which is great. But what do I do with it in the meanwhile? And how do I make the numbers work and all those other things? So I eventually learned how to do those things and then decided to become my own real estate agent. And then that's given me the opportunity to build my own future wealth, if you will, and to teach others how to do it as well.
You know, obviously, like you say 11 years
Yeah.
Has it been always in Vancouver area?
Yeah, always in the Lower Mainland.
So that's been a pretty crazy environment the last 11 years.
No question.
So it was like you said, you had your career with Lay's, but then you got into like the real estate market that's been hot here for so long.
Yeah.
It was essentially throwing yourself to the wolves pretty quick. But it must be kind of fun how much change there's been in the last 11 years.
Sure.
On your feet.
We'll go with fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been fun. It's been challenging. I get bored easily. So the nature of my business, it changes all the time. So that keeps my brain engaged, which is awesome. Some of it's fun. Some of it's frustrating. There's been a lot of regulatory changes. So lots of paperwork, which is awesome when we get to do extra paperwork. But just being out there and watching what's happening, and people buy something for their family and then the kids grow up and then they want to change into something else, and they're looking at, well, we bought this condo at $200,000 back in 2012 and we're selling it for $600,000 7 or 8 years later, and you see the wheels start to turn. It's like, oh, I can actually get that bigger property that I wanted where the kids can play, or we can have a yard, or that kind of thing. I've also always loved buildings and architecture and stuff. So being able to go inside some of these houses, some of them are super sketch, but it's interesting always to see the insides too and what's going on.
So we've talked before.
Yep.
You're a member here at the Fountainhead as well. So
Absolutely.
You've said that you specialize in basically bringing awareness to people on buying for investment reasons, and to buy property to rent out, and to basically build your wealth that way.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us how you got involved in that, and why that's your specialty.
Gotcha. Yeah, about half of my business is working with people who are buying not to live in, but to invest. And in BC, and I think in lots of parts of Canada, the government seems to rely on private people to provide most of the rental housing out there. There's some buildings out there that were built just to be rented, but for the most part, it's basement suites, it's individual condos, it's individual owners that might have a space or one or two spaces that are providing a lot of the inventory for rent. And for everybody that lives in the Lower Mainland and has been here for any amount of time, we know that that's a really tight market. There's always more people coming here because obviously we're in the best part of Canada. It's the only place where you don't hear words like with the wind chill factor and with the humidity and all that stuff. People want to be here and they got to live somewhere. And to be able to provide some of that housing for people that are moving to the area is pretty fun in and of itself, and to provide quality housing. But at the same time, as we've seen with house values for all of those who follow the news, which I don't necessarily recommend, but
Yeah.
we've gone up and up and up, and same thing with rents and everything else. So from an investment standpoint, it's a great way to build something long term. Like if you go out and buy a stock in Coca-Cola, for example, the CEO of Coke decides what happens with that company and that stock. But if you go out and buy yourself a condo, you decide what happens. It's yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you get to choose what happens with it. You get to touch it. You get to look at it every day. It doesn't disappear. It's not an on paper return or anything like that. So, but yeah, like I said, I kind of self-taught initially when I first sat down and thought, well, what am I going to do? Do I just invest in Canada savings bonds and get a very small percentage every year? And is that going to be enough? And what's it going to look like for my children when they're ready for their retirement? And a question that was brought up to me once by someone who's been in the industry much longer than I have is, how would my life have looked different if my grandparents had an extra $1 million?
Yeah.
And what would that have done for my own life? And how would that have changed my life and my sister's life and my kids' lives and whatnot? So I didn't have that extra $1 million, obviously,
Yeah.
growing up, but I'd like to be able to provide that for my children and their grandchildren, and to build something.
Yeah, as soon as you have kids, it kind of becomes
Absolutely.
number one importance to you is how you're going to set them up in the future. I mean, like I think right now is very difficult time when it comes to finances for a lot of people. So
Absolutely.
uh, families looking for a way to push themselves ahead because it's very difficult now. People living check to check. So my next question for you, like since COVID and just since these crazy, I'll call it recession times,
Yeah.
how have you seen your business change just on who's investing right now? Because are you seeing a drop in young people?
Yes.
Yeah,
So we've got a few things kind of going on. Of course, we've all heard about how insane everything was when COVID started, which was a bit of a shock to the real estate industry as a whole. We kind of thought, oh, COVID, now what? Everybody's going to stop, but it actually went in the other direction.
yeah,
And part of the reason that happened was a lot of people just didn't want to sell anymore. And when people don't want to sell anymore, but there's still people that want to buy, that becomes a bit of a problem.
yeah,
And that's ultimately what started to make our prices go nuts. When you have 10 or 15 or 20 people that want to buy every one property that comes on the market, they start to fight it out, and you hear about bidding wars, and you hear about all these other people making offers without any conditions or subjects, and everything just starts to go nuts, and it snowballs because the fear of missing out, right?
yeah,
And during that time, interest rates, of course, were extremely low. So I saw lots of people getting in not only to buy a place that they're going to live, but to get rental condos, because the rental market was also suffering. People stopped renting out some of their units because they don't want to bring the plague into their house,
yeah,
for those who have a basement suite in the home when they're living. And it's still taking some time right now for that to shake itself out. Everything is still low as far as inventory levels. But as the government has been raising interest rates to combat inflation, of course, it's made it much more expensive to get into that market. Whereas you might have qualified for a $500,000 mortgage a year ago, now you might only qualify for a $400,000 or $350,000 mortgage. And
yeah,
that, with the prices going in one direction and the ability to qualify going in the other, has created some challenges for sure. Now we're starting to see that sort of balance a bit. Prices kind of crested in about April or so of last year. So it's been about a year now, and they've been slowly coming down ever since. And that will eventually balance itself out again.
yeah,
So what I saw kind of as interest rates were falling and prices were still rising is people just stopped investing.
yeah,
They kind of went to the sidelines, because when you're buying your home to live in, you're buying something for you. It's personal. It's a family choice and a lifestyle choice. Of course, most people would rather own the place they live in than have to pay a landlord for it. But when you're looking at an investor, it's not about whether or not they want to live there or not. It's about how the numbers work.
yeah,
And when the interest rates rise and the prices don't subsequently fall, the numbers start to work less and less. There
yeah,
just isn't enough rent anymore to cover the cost of owning that property.
yeah,
And at that point, you're basically paying for somebody else to live in your property, and that doesn't doesn't work in the long-term picture. So a lot of investors I found just kind of went to the sidelines,
Yeah.
sat on what they had. Some people liquidated their properties because they got themselves into a place where the big increase in interest rates, you can't increasing your rents doesn't work to follow those interest rates. So there were some investors that were in a bind. They had to sell off their properties, and that kind of happens too. That's kind of about building in a plan B and C and D just to make sure that those things don't happen. But it is certainly one of the risks involved. But it seems like it's settling a bit now. There's some opportunity again. Like I said, there's people that are selling with more reasonable expectations of what they're going to get for a sale price on the property based on the current lending environment, and that's allowing people to get back in again. So
Yeah, I've talked to a few real estate agents on the podcast before, and just through different times of the last few years. So obviously, like a couple of years ago, it's pretty crazy times. How you had to, if you were giving house tours, it was all virtual. There was
absolutely.
so much of that kind of stuff going on that it was stressful for the industry, and then also just prices, like being out here has always been cheaper than downtown Vancouver and Vancouver
sure.
as a whole. People were working downtown Vancouver. A lot of people that live there, work there. As soon as offices were shut down and people were working from home, you saw an influx of people moving from their apartments in Vancouver out to the suburbs because
Mhm.
they can get more bang for their buck. From what I've noticed and I've talked to these people, what that created is just it brought basically the prices up out here as well, because these people were used to paying millions of dollars for a one bedroom condo in
Yeah.
downtown Vancouver, and now they're out in Port Coquitlam, Maple Ridge buying a townhome for the same price. But
Yeah.
when I've talked to friends and myself included, we've sold property or just yeah, when we sell our properties or thought about selling properties, the question is where do we go?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because even with how much you can make on properties now, even places out in Mission are the price of what Coquitlam was 5 years, 10 years ago, right? So
Absolutely.
it's a difficult question, obviously, to ask anybody in real estate right now, just because yeah, it seems that like even if you're making a really solid income, putting that money away to have a place is extremely difficult. So like what I appreciate with what you're doing is if people are putting any bit of money away into savings accounts, anything or
Mhm.
into stocks, crypto, anything, if they have enough money to possibly put down on a house in a market where people need housing, that's where like I can really appreciate what you're doing, because that will honestly that real estate seems to be the only way to secure like knowing that you're gonna make something from your investment.
For
So
sure.
like I know just from experience and just from visualizing, um, a lot of people that buy investment properties are like older retirees, um, a lot of boomers and stuff. How do you think, like, do you think time's gonna just change the fact that it's all them and it's gonna be like their children that end up taking over those properties, that finally there's gonna be like a generation of younger people that can invest again, but it's through basically getting stuff through family?
Yeah. There's a few things. I mean, I do see younger people into it and the way that they're doing it. So the negative side to investing in real estate is you need money. You need
Yeah,
money for a down payment and deposit. On the plus side, it doesn't have to be your money.
yeah,
So I've seen younger people that maybe don't have a lot of money, but they have a lot of drive and a lot of time and a lot of interest to learn. And they've gone out and studied how the numbers work and where the numbers work and analyzed properties and figured out where to buy, what kind of returns they're going to get, and then approached some of those older people that have, they bought their house in West Vancouver for $60,000 40 years ago and it's worth $5 million now and it's been paid off forever. To approach someone like that, and maybe they put a line of credit against their house to pull out that deposit, and they partner with the younger person. Maybe the boomer, they just want to enjoy their retirement. They want to get a solid return on their money, and they don't want to do any of the work. Whereas the The younger person maybe has the knowledge and the drive and the desire to do the work. They just don't have the money. And you kind of mesh those two things together and come up with some sort of an agreement and a split on the property, and one does the work and one does the money, and away you go, and you split your profits and you split your cash flow. And I've seen quite a number of younger investors getting into doing it that way, starting off with people that they already know, like maybe their parents or their grandparents or aunts or uncles or whatever. And then once they've got a track record going and approaching people that maybe they don't know, that are more arm's length, because most of the time, if you meet someone for the first time, they're not going to trust you with a few $100,000 of their money before you have any kind of
Yeah.
track record to show that you've done what you've done. But it's a way for both sides to get what they want. The younger person gets to get into the market, and the older person gets a return on their money, and they get to do their thing while someone else is doing the work. Similar to if you buy a stock or whatever, it's kind of working in the background, doing its thing, and
Yeah.
only in this case, it's real estate. And the beauty of real estate that I find that you don't get in most places like the stock market and whatnot is the banks will lend you up to 80% of the cost to buy your house, where they won't do that with a stock or a bond or a mutual fund. So
Yeah.
when you're only putting in 20% but getting the benefit of all 100%, you start to get some multiplier and some leverage in there. And there's a deep dive into numbers that I could go in there and stand on my soapbox for hours and show how it all works. But ultimately, because you're using somebody else's money, and i.e. the banks, to purchase this investment that's going up over time, it actually equals a much higher percentage return than if you're putting all the money in yourself.
Yeah.
And then theoretically, if you hold your property long enough, your mortgage gets paid down, your tenants are doing that, paying it down for you. The value goes up over time, and the income that the property is generating every month, maybe it starts off at $50 a month or something like that. But as everything starts to shift and your rents go up and your mortgage goes down, that 50 could become 100 or 200 or 500, and you get a few of those, and you suddenly have a very solid stream of passive income if you can get 3 or 4 or 5 of those over the next 20 years kind of thing. And even then you have if you actually need to sell one, there's also money there to be had. So there's a number of different ways that it can work out for you in the long term. But yeah, as far as younger people getting in, if they don't have money of their own, there's nothing that says you have to have your own money to do it.
Yeah.
You just got to talk to people, build relationships, build your skills, and be willing to work.
Yeah. Where would you say is like, since you've been in real estate in the Lower Mainland, what area of the Lower Mainland have you seen just like grow the most?
From a standpoint of the number of people moving into the area, which in turn, of course, drives the price of housing and all that, I've seen Maple Ridge and Langley in particular have grown like crazy. Vancouver is extremely expensive, like the actual Vancouver proper, followed by Burnaby and Richmond and Coquitlam and New West. They're all quite pricey, kind of the further west you go, basically. But as soon as you get south of the river, there are pockets in Surrey that are some really good value. Langley is one of the fastest growing cities in BC population-wise. They've been building condos like crazy for the last 7 or 8 years in there. And Maple Ridge, ever since the Golden Ears Bridge went in and the Pitt River Bridge got upgraded from the old swing bridge, it suddenly brought it a lot closer to Vancouver. So, and then you got your West Coast Express as well. So prices have just gone nuts there. There was a point where I was looking at kind of the averages throughout the COVID times, and the average price of a house in Maple Ridge was starting to catch up to the average price of a house in Port Coquitlam, to the point where they were only a couple of $100,000 apart.
Yeah.
But you're talking about an additional 15 or 20 minutes commute time.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned earlier, as that wave happens, as people realize I don't need to go to Vancouver anymore, I can go get my own piece of grass that I can quarantine on rather than being stuck in a 1-bedroom condo.
Yeah.
The wave, it just started to roll up the valley, right?
Yeah.
And even places like Chilliwack, there was a point where the average price of a house in Chilliwack was over $1 million.
Yeah.
Mission as well, and it was that's insane. I mean, there was 5 or 6 years ago, it was $300,000 for $400,000 for a house.
Yeah, I know.
And suddenly it's $1.1 million.
Yeah.
Now that's come back down again, of course, but
that brings that question. It's like, where do you go after that? As somebody in, like, if you live in Mission and you bought a place for $300,000 and now it's worth 1.3 million, and you're just like, yeah, I can cash out right now and everything, but I don't want to make myself house broke or whatever. It's
exactly.
Like, and you're already as far out as Mission, right? So I lived in Maple Ridge. Me and Aaron moved out there, and we bought a place in 2015. And the growth from 2015 to, I'd say, 2019 it was insane. Like I lived in Coquitlam my entire life before that, and everything that like yeah, Coquitlam grew fast, but it took its time. Like you
Yeah.
saw it gradually. It instantly happened in Maple Ridge, where we were the townhouse we lived in was the only one on the street, a long, long, long street, and all of a sudden that whole street is townhomes and newer, like a lot of like smaller detached homes or whatever. But now you have people that would never have moved out to Maple Ridge 20 years ago or even thought of it, even if they were just kids then. Like Maple Ridge was so far out.
Hmm.
Now it is seems like it's just way more connected to everything. Same like this is what people like my parents went through when they moved to Coquitlam from Vancouver in the 1970s and
Yeah,
80s,
for sure.
where all their friends that live in Vancouver is like, why are you moving out to the boonies, right? Like when in reality it's a 15-minute drive down the highway. So obviously the more people that come into this province and to this area of the province, we're gonna have to start expanding into these areas more and more and more. That's where it gets, I feel like it gets scary for the youth of the area, where if it's like you grew up somewhere you definitely can't afford there, and then now it's like, oh, I'll move out to Maple Ridge, I can afford there. Now it's up pretty
Yeah.
much where Coquitlam is, at a little bit cheaper but not much. Now it's like you're seeing more people consider the Kootenays, and like Okanagan's not cheap anymore either. So it's just BC is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place to live, but it seems like it's just been with everything, interest rates, everything. It's going against us, and it's sad because I think there's so much opportunity and there's so much growth that can be done in specifically British Columbia. There's too many restrictions on everything
Oh
when it
yeah.
comes to building. Yeah, you know that as as a real estate agent,
Yeah.
if they just let people build complexes, houses, and not made it so bloody difficult for people to get the license to do it, and just every loop you have to or hoop you have to jump through
Yeah.
to build. The fix is let people build, and you have more housing for people. Because right now, you're talking people that rent literally in some places like going up like 100% in rent, like literally like double their rent.
Hmm.
Uh, like you have landlords going to them and being like, "Hey, I have to like literally double your rent in some areas." That's because they're literally trying to make what their mortgage has now become, right? It's really difficult, and I could see. I have met like friends that are real estate agents. I've talked to you a few times. I am very that's not the word proud, but just like it is like to you for you to stick your head down and go hard still in these times when it's not the easiest thing to do.
No, absolutely not. But like anything, I believe that once you say no to something, that something's not possible, you've cut off your mind and your ability to think about anything other than no, I can't do this. And I hear it a lot in media and interviews and stuff. I will never be able to afford a house in
Yeah,
Vancouver. As soon as you say you're never going, you tell yourself you're never going to be able to, that's probably going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy and be true.
yeah,
The reality is there's still lots of people buying in the lower mainland. And yes, some of them have to go to Maple Ridge, some of them have to go to Chilliwack. Maybe you're not moving into the forever home right away as the first home. It's become a more of a step process
yeah,
where maybe you get the smallest, cheapest condo you can find just to get in. But once you're in and you're on the ladder, you can then slowly start to, because the values of properties historically over time in the lower mainland go up a
yeah,
lot faster than your incomes go up
yeah,
or any of that kind of stuff. So it's just a matter of getting in.
yeah,
And a lot of people right now are getting in. A lot of the boomers that you mentioned, they bought their houses again 30, 40 years ago.
yeah,
They're selling them for a lot of money, moving into something much smaller out this way, and giving a good chunk of that money as an early inheritance to their children in order
yeah,
to use as a down payment. So we're finding a lot of down payments and deposits are coming from parents as a gift.
yeah,
A lot of people, I think, also have this idea that they actually absolutely have to live in the city of Vancouver,
yeah.
which, sure, but you pay for it. If you
Okay.
want the word Vancouver in your address, you pay for it. And like you said, to live in Coquitlam or Maple Ridge, it's not that far,
No.
and it's significantly less. I mean, North Surrey, Wally area, now called City Center, has had towers going up like crazy.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking, it's still somewhat more affordable. There's a SkyTrain right there and whatnot. Yeah, it's not the greatest neighborhood, but I know Surrey's working hard to make it a nicer neighborhood. And
Yeah. They have to. They have
they
to
have to.
really clean it up because
Yeah,
it has so much potential. People need to live places.
for sure.
If you Vancouver, we're surrounded by water and mountain. It's really hard
And a border.
to expand Vancouver. We have plenty of space to expand out in the valley. Even out there's certain places there's like just emptiness.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actually Vancouver, they cannot build anymore.
Nope.
It's unless they built up a mountain, and then there's so much liability there, it's not going to happen. Um, but like we need to allow these areas to build and to if we're going to bring in the people and want people in British Columbia and Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, we need to build property. Um, that's yeah, I think that's also a very good way for people to make money on their investment. There's these build to their pre-builds that they can purchase,
Absolutely.
and that's always a way to almost it seems like instantly make money on your investment because it's always a lower price if you're the first one to own it, and we need more of those. There needs to be more townhomes going up and everything, and you're seeing it slowly. I think Poco's done a pretty
Yeah.
good job too, but there's certain areas that just like Coquitlam seems like it's a little slow on the new housing for people. It's because you have a lot of the retirees living in their
Yeah.
huge lots in their homes that literally, like you
Yeah.
said, bought it 40 years ago for $40,000, sixty
Yeah.
thousand
They're not
dollars.
making more single family lots out this way. Like
No,
it's cities like Vancouver, the number of single family lots have been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking because there is no way to go but up.
yeah,
There, like you said, there is no more land.
yeah. I
And
saw like BC, Premier BC announced something yesterday. I think it
mhm.
was yesterday or sometime recently that they're allowing more like units to be built on
Yeah.
property or something. I don't know, but it's a good idea because if you look at houses in Coquitlam in some areas like 15,000 square foot lots, and they have like one house sitting on it that's
Yep.
older, kind of run down. It's like you literally knock down one of those houses and you can put 3, 4 units on that property easily.
Yep.
It's
There's a balancing act. I mean, I think we're behind on a lot of those kinds of things from a planning perspective in the entire Lower Mainland. There's a lot of NIMBYism, if you will, the whole not in my backyard. You talk to people that have been in the neighborhood for 30 years and, oh, there's so many people now and they want to build another tower. And
yeah,
yes, because people move here. Our
yeah,
population is growing every year.
yeah,
And either we turn off the taps and don't let people move here anymore, or we got to build something to put them in, like
yeah,
housing.
yeah,
And if we have 10,000 people that move here and only build 9,000 homes, we have an extra 1,000 that we need to house the next year. So now it's 10,000 plus 1,000 in the next year that we got to build for. And that number starts to pile up after a while. And then they start to rent, but then we don't have any rentals anymore because
no,
those run out and the people need to live somewhere. And if, like you said, if we're not building, it's interesting if you start to look at some of the charts and graphs around the average time to get building permits in the various cities and municipalities in the Lower Mainland. Some of them are 6, 7 months to get your building permit. Some of them are up to 2 years or more to get a building permit. And
yeah,
that's, you talk to developers and they, the ones that take 2+ years to get a development permit, they don't want to build there
yeah,
because it's much more expensive. You got to buy your lot and then sit on it for 2 years while you wait.
yeah,
And you're paying your mortgage on your empty land, and maybe the market changes in the meanwhile, or construction costs change and all this stuff.
yeah. It's too risky.
So yeah, so you see some cities that condos are going up rather rapidly, and other ones that just seem to sit there and stagnate. And
Yeah. It's too much control.
yeah,
It's too many people with their hands in the one basket because it's.
exactly.
Yeah, I think in the States you could literally, if you're a developer and you buy a chunk of land, you could literally, if you hire a crew, you could have it up in a week. Like like it's not going to happen, but
Yeah,
like figuratively speaking, you could do that. It seems like there's just too much. There's too much gatekeeping. Like it's just like you have to. We're going to choose. It happens in even commercial real estate, right? You got like with zoning. right? Zoning, a lot of areas, I know PoCo is pretty lenient on their zoning because it's like if a small business or a business wants to come in here, unless it really doesn't fit with the zone, let's rent the space out, right? That's important. Um, but yeah, Mark, it's a very interesting topic I could talk about for
For sure.
forever. I want to promote what you and what you do. So let our audience know how they can find you, how they can get in contact with you.
Sure. So I'm a real estate agent. I like to base my business around education and teaching and showing people why something may or may not work and helping them find the ideal spot for them, whether it's an investment or a home. So I don't pressure anybody. I just provide facts and information. Um, I live here in Port Coquitlam. I've been here since 2004. My website is markgeorgehomes.com, MARKGEORGE homes.com. Um, should I tell my phone number on here?
You can. I mean, if it's your
Sure.
business phone, you want people to contact
Yeah,
you.
people can call me anytime, text, email, 604-723-8110. I'm always happy to answer questions and whatnot. That doesn't obligate someone to work with me or to, you know, get constantly bombarded by marketing messages from me. I'm happy to just answer questions and help the people figure out what's going on. Like any organization and industry, there's a lot of real estate agents out there, and there's not everyone is an awesome fit for every person. So
Yeah,
I'm happy to just talk to people and see if that fits there, because I also don't want to work with people who aren't going to be the right fit for me. So
yeah, yeah.
just I freely offer whatever information I have, provide anything that people will ask me about, and
That's
away we
awesome.
go.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's what I appreciate about you, and I know just like from I know you and just talking to you is you care about what you do. You're looking to your clients' futures. That's what you're looking to
Absolutely.
help. You even just said it. There's a ton of real estate agents out there. There's a good handful of them that just are getting into it because of the market, and they know it's a
Yeah.
quick buck. But there's people that actually care. Like I go back to an episode of The Simpsons, and it's Marge is a real estate
Yeah.
agent, and they're trying to push her to be that real estate agent that nobody wants to work with, that one
Yeah.
that just wants to sell you crap and call it gold,
Yeah.
right? But no, there's a good chunk of real estate agents, and I include you in that are looking out for their clients' best interest. It's like, yeah, it's nice getting money, but you want them to come back if they're going to do it
Absolutely.
again, or spread the word that you did everything you could to help them and their futures out. So I appreciate what you do, and it's yeah, it's a huge part of say a lot of young families' lives, is their investments and their futures. So
No question.
putting your time and effort into that, I appreciate that, man.
Thank you.
No,
Appreciate it. Yeah. It is how I support my family and pay my bills, but it's not just a paycheck.
yeah,
Like I work with people for a significant chunk of time when we're looking for a house. You get to know people and to
yeah.
become part of their lives almost. And I like to continue that relationship long beyond when the sale is done. And that's not going to happen if they weren't happy with the work that I did. And
Well, that's awesome, man.
so
Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. If any of you guys are looking to buy or just even chat about real estate, talk to Mark. He's great. He's definitely someone who has your best interests at heart. So, yeah, thank you so much for watching the show today, and thank you so much for being our guest today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike.
This has been PoCommunity. My guest was Mark George from Keller Williams. Have a good one.